Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by NSTA, the National Science Teaching Association. Find out more about what NSTA has to offer at nsta.org. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, Science for the Classroom and beyond. And in this episode, our guests talk to us about expanding science curiosity across an entire continent.
First of all, we're not sticking to a particular curriculum. So all over the continent, children can understand, because if you think of the basics of science, the main objectives and the levels of understanding are the same. So these kind of things that we are hoping to do is elicit a lot more curiosity. And the fact that ENGINE is getting noticed is a really, really good thing, because I think we will have the opportunity of making an impact on the education on the continent.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel. So many of you listening have probably recognized that we are doing another little arc here talking about how to do science at home. That's kind of how we've talked about it.
Yeah.
But really what we're really wanting to look at is how you all have adapted to science in some extraordinary circumstances, particularly during a pandemic.
Yeah, you're right. We have done a couple science at homes, taking plants home, doing the research kits from the last episode. A lot of these are, you're doing science at home, whether you liked it or not. It just kind of was forced by the circumstances. But all of them had led to opportunities. And boy, does this opportunity span a wide distance.
Yeah, so we found out about the ENGINE TV show that came out of Africa and knew we had to get them on our show, not only to talk about what they were up against and what they were doing, but also to see the importance of such a project across the entire continent of Africa. So if you didn't catch that part, that's the big piece there, is that this is a TV show for young learners to learn science across the entire continent of Africa. And a couple important hallmarks there is that obviously this was born out of the pandemic as a way to learn science at home, but it's also an opportunity for these young learners to see themselves as scientists with role models from their own cultures.
Exactly. I think it's also kind of interesting. We're going to learn a little bit more about what science education is like in other countries, and in this case, countries in the continent of Africa, through three different guests that help make ENGINE possible. Let's meet those guests right now.
Let's start in this order: Irene, Joy, and Gosia.
Okay, my name is Irene Nyangoma. I teach primary 5 and primary 6 in Clark Junior School in Uganda. It's a private school. Yeah, it's a private school in Uganda.
And Joy?
Hi, I'm Joy. I'm calling in from Nairobi, Kenya. I am a teacher and scientist. I have taught in schools in England and in Kenya and been a school leader, as well as working for the government in scientific research.
And Gosia?
My name is Gosia, and I'm the creative director at Peripheral Vision International. We're a nonprofit that develops, produces, and distributes educational entertainment in sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to talk to you. We've been slowly increasing our worldwide presence, and we just hit someone in Oceania, so we're kind of working our way through continents. So this is our first call from Africa. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be here.
So what caught our eye was the ENGINE television show for, is that what I would say? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, we call it ENGINE. We ENGINE. We pronounce it. I don't even know if with my accent I'm pronouncing it the way we'd like for it to be pronounced, but it's spelled N*GEN, which is short for Next Generation, but we like to pronounce it like engine, the car engine that moves,
Yeah,
or any engine that moves anything. We like the play on the pronunciation of those two.
Yeah, well, it did come across loud and clear, so we understood that, and I like the little play on words there a lot. So this show started back in September of 2020, correct?
Correct.
Why did you start the show back then, and what was the need for the show?
So actually, let me just jump in to say that it started broadcasting in September, but of course the work on the show started much earlier, and before even the pilot episode of Engine, there was another show that was the inspiration for it, and I'll let Irene take it from here and talk about it and how it became Engine.
Okay. Thank you, Gosia. Yeah, so we as a school were suddenly told to close the school. This was a government directive. Obviously, once Corona, the outbreak just became, the news, we were just told suddenly. We were probably about 2 weeks, maybe more, into the term, and were told to close the school. So I think at the back of our minds, we kept thinking, okay, the schools are going to open again. But our worry, I think at the time, was how do we keep the learning going? And so during some of the discussions, our head teacher decides, why don't we air some, we were brainstorming, and so she thinks, okay, let's, create some content on TV. Uganda is largely, most people aren't very well off, so if we considered options of online school, but we thought, how many people can afford the tablets? Not many people have computers in their homes, but the one device that is probably more readily accessible, maybe not in every home, is the television. So that's when we thought, okay, let's just create some content and have it air on TV. And that's how a show that we called Crested Kids, because our school has a crested crane on as the emblem. So we just, coined the name Crested Kids. So we started airing a show with hardly any TV experience, and it was very, very interesting to do that with no experience at all. But it was very, very a lot of fun. And then the show started to air, and the next thing we know, we are being reached out to consider doing Engine. So that's how that started. And we have grown in experience. We're not experts in the field yet, but we love and enjoy the experience.
Well, you've definitely come a long way.
Yes, we have, because you start with hardly any experience in scripting. We never had any scripted material. We'll just think, okay, let's talk about bees and flowers. And in fact, if I remember correctly, when we were introduced to PVI, we were told, okay, present something. So we presented our material in a very colorful and interestingly, while those who recorded what we showed, every time they had to edit, they struggled because each cut was different. So in the process of trying to edit and create, they told us, honestly, we are struggling. So that's how far we've come. And in our experience while working with PVI, that's when we, for the first time, understood that, we can actually work with a script. And There's this device where, sorry, it's the end of the day, but yeah, there's that device where you actually read the code.
A teleprompter?
Yes. So I was thinking, so this is how they do the daily news. They don't have all of that was new and incredible, really, to learn and get comfortable, getting comfortable in the screen with, the screen and learning to act natural when you are thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Yeah, so it's been quite a journey.
Was the audience for the first show, was that just for the students in your school?
Well, no, the idea was just, I think at the back of our minds, we're thinking, how do we stay relevant, like I said? So it was broadcast on national television.
Oh, okay.
And we had no way of knowing who was watching. We obviously sent word out to the parents in the school that, watch our teachers on TV. And quite honestly, I watched some of the footage and I thought, oh no, we could definitely do better. I think, and a lot, my husband used to tell me, you're a little too critical of yourself, because I could look at the footage and say, oh goodness, I could have done that better. I could have, I could have dressed better, or yeah. But
well, we don't have to worry about what we're wearing in an audio podcast. That's one benefit that Dale and I have had.
Yeah.
What you've mentioned here is very similar to the path we took many years ago. When we first started this, it was an experiment and we tried it out. And the first episode that we did back when we did this for a state level and a smaller audience was basically Dale and I talking about science news with each other. And so it wasn't that engaging. And we have learned a lot. We've upgraded a lot of our system and how we do things. And so you've made that journey a lot faster than we did from where you are. But the other thing that kind of stands out to me is you had mentioned, like, how before when we were talking about how my own children, how are they learning and how are they doing? We have seen a huge increase in our own children and our students being able to do things digitally in a better fashion and doing it much more adeptly. And I think the same can be said of a lot of teachers, yourselves included, of course, learning how to use something like a teleprompter and what does recording mean and all those things that we probably took for granted before the pandemic. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. We do use computers, but I've seen that, during this pandemic, we've had to obviously use them a lot more. We also started doing the online program and developing content, digitally. So yes, we've definitely grown from this experience, and so have the children. Obviously, those who could afford could then sought to buy themselves some computers, and we're very interested in learning how to use computers. Yes, definitely. So we have grown from this experience, and even in the production, and trying to relay and teach, using different, different media. We've definitely grown.
I'm curious to know more about your school. So the shows, for example, like what ages are you targeting, and what is a school day prior to the pandemic, of course? What's a school day like? What are your, what is a science class like?
Okay. Well, thank you for that question. We are a progressive school, so you could say we are a blend between the local, the way most public schools would operate, and the way the international schools would operate. But I think the main driving factor is the content, what needs to be covered. So as the Ugandan local content is very, very wide, and therefore many times teachers struggle to cover all the content while keeping the lessons interactive and fun, because we are more focused on the knowledge acquisition, which is changing, but that's just the way our system operates. It's very knowledge based, so it's like you need to know the facts. So a science lesson will therefore be very, very theoretical and hardly practical. So yes, that's our reality, because the content is so wide. Well, the school day runs from 8:30 to about 3, which is not the traditional day for a school. So actually the children will report about 8:15, 8:30, get in, do what we would call circle time, which is also not the traditional way. In the traditional school, you just go straight into the lessons and have 45 minutes of maybe, well, that's one period. So you have lesson after lesson, and it's a lot of writing and copying from the board. But what we try to do in at Clark Junior School is understand that children obviously can't operate like adults would. We can't expect them to sit and listen to the teacher teaching all the whole day, or expect them to sit and just copy notes and learn. So we try to make it a little more interactive and engaging with fun games. Then with science particularly, we are trying to do better at this, but make it more practical and have experiments. But that, like I said, is a challenge because of the content that needs to be covered. So yeah, we will try to make it practical. So the advantage with this show and the experience that we've gotten has sort of opened my mind and opened our minds to the need to get the children experiencing and touching and doing a lot more than writing.
I see.
Yeah, using visuals. So we will try to show videos during the lesson, but that's not commonly practiced in most schools. That's more an international, approach, or go out. So we'll probably do trips, maybe because our content is also slightly different from what you would study. For example, my primary 5 science class will be expected to know about chicken, about bees, about, then we'll go into matter and energy. So yeah, you might get an opportunity to go to one, take one trip. So go to a bee farm or poultry farm, but because, like I say, the content is quite wide, and then there are limitations. There's only so much you can do. So we'll pick one item and maybe go to the poultry farm, but we do try to make it interactive. So just so you know, if they're looking at the systems of keeping poultry, then we'll get them to get practical and create the battery cage system, if that makes any sense to you. Yeah, so we'll try to make it practical, but we don't do as many experiments as we could. Yeah, because of the time constraint.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's basically, we don't do as many experiments as we could. And yes, so I've had the opportunity to watch people doing experiments and watching the children. That's outside system, and watching children, the wonder of discovery, while you actually do the experiment. We have lost a little bit of that. We don't have as much of that in our curriculum, but we are looking to change that. Yeah. So the show actually helped. just watching some of the children watch the show and see that it's possible to make some of the things that they created on the show opened my eyes, but also it was interesting to watch children's reactions, my own children, as they watched, because I was I always tuned in promptly at 8
Sure.
to critique myself. But anyway.
Well, I did notice in the show that you have opportunities for kids, and these are little clips by kids, actually, to do something hands-on. And so what you're saying is that that's more of a hope to see more of, but not necessarily always practiced.
Exactly. So in the classroom, it's a little difficult to do as many experiments as we would like. But looking at children, engaging in those activities while on the show, the enthusiasm, I've gotten feedback from people who have watched the show, friends and their children who just, I guess I'm impressed to see children doing these activities and then trying out the very same activities. So I think, it's definitely been eye-opening to see those children engage. And even to hear these very same children who've taken part desire to do more, to learn more, to get, be amazed, if you watch the episode of the rocket, to make a rocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were really thrilled, to see it propel upwards and just the squeals of excitement. It wasn't staged, that was learning. Yeah, that was learning actually happening. So, I think I'll let, others say their piece. Yeah, but thank you so much for having me on the show.
Joy, what have your experiences been in the classroom?
Hi. Well, thinking of what's been going on in the old Kenyan primary education system, sounds a lot like what was happening in Uganda, with what Irene was saying. The classes were really, really content heavy, and really dense, and so much material for children to learn. And the key objective was you have to learn all of this because at the end of 8 years of education at primary school level, you would be sitting an exam, a national exam called the Kenya Certificate for Primary Education. And in order to graduate into high school, you had to pass that exam with really, really outstanding grades. And it was almost like cramming for the and the data and the information that you're given, you write down, you memorize. The school days, especially once you started to get closer to standard 7 and 8, would start sometimes from 7:30 in the morning and be 7 days a week so that they could cover the whole content that was required for the exam. There was so much. There was so much.
How old are the kids doing that? What age?
12, 13 years old.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yes.
I don't think I could get my 14-year-old to do that.
There's adults that won't be able to do it.
Yeah, that's the same in Uganda for sure.
Absolutely. But the thing is, in East Africa, and I'm sure Irene can agree, and most of Africa, education is really, really highly valued. Because the places available for higher education are very, very few. And families understand that if you don't get into higher education and further education, then your opportunities of getting jobs just trickles down to nothing. So, in fact, at the end of the year, because our schools start in January, the news on the school exam results is bigger than anything else on the news from November to December. It's the biggest thing. The only thing that is bigger than that is during the national elections. So everybody's paying attention to how the exams are. It's really, really hectic. But the government is rolling out a new system which is, they call it competency-based curriculum, which is trying to include more 21st century skills, so a little bit of critical thinking and problem solving, and trying to get the children's voices out in the classrooms. It's a slow rollout, but I think it will be a lot better for the youngsters. They're still not sure about like an end of primary school national exam. I think they're going to slowly try to get rid of it, but they still need a system in which they can assess the students and determine who can go into which secondary school.
Sure.
So it's almost like a prison confinement. When I moved, I used to live in England, and when I moved home just 10 years ago, the biggest conversation amongst parents was schools. Which school are you going to take your child to? Because depending on where you took your child, it's almost as though their future would be impacted by this. So people would even bribe the exam council officials in order to get some idea of what the exam papers would be like, so that they would be able to help their children pass the exams. And there's been huge corruption at that level. But for the poor child in the classroom, what was missing, if we're thinking of just science education, is the wow factor. The wow factor, the relevance is just not there. You sit like a robot and you take the notes and you internalize them, regardless of how relevant they could be for you or for your learning. So even now during COVID, learning about diseases and stuff doesn't make you, it seems completely irrelevant to what's going on actually around you. Because the teaching education system has been such that you've got to make sure you've met the learning objectives and the deliverables, and there's like a checklist that you're working alongside.
Sure.
So it's been quite tough.
Do you think the show is possibly going to influence, you said some of this is changing, that the show can kind of influence that because it puts the idea of what's been missing in people's minds?
It would be really good if it does that, but already I've had people asking, so how connected is this to the curriculum? So the parents are more interested in knowing how, is this going to be like a cheat sheet for them and their kids? And saying, no, you're just trying to get them interested in and excited about science. Is really what we're trying to do, and make especially young girls realize that there are people like them who are being really successful in the field. I think as the show, as we get into season 2 and further seasons, people will start to take a lot more notice of what we are doing, because the nice thing is once you're eliciting curiosity within a child and they're asking interesting and exciting questions, these have to be responded to by the teachers once they're presented with this. It would help bring movement and change within the curriculum. I mean, we've got a movement of a change in education happening here in Kenya. And there are a couple of schools that are changing the way that they teach in the classroom, which insists on more of the student's voice being heard during the lesson. In order for the teacher to engage with the student, it helps them measure the level of understanding of the topic. Then they make it project-based as well, so the children can think outside the box and bring in a lot of relevance. I think the beauty of Engine is that, first of all, we're not sticking to a particular curriculum. So all over the continent, children can understand, because if you think of the basics of science, the main objectives and the levels of understanding are the same. So a child who, for instance, is making a volcano at home is understanding the combination of acid and sodium bicarbonate and what bubbles are and everything. and have fun while doing it. And then that will make them think, well, what can I do to make the bubbles more or reduce it? These kind of things that we are hoping to do is elicit a lot more curiosity. And the fact that Engine is getting noticed is a really, really good thing, because I think we would have the opportunity of making an impact on the education on the continent.
You mentioned that you have taken initiative to showcase girls, especially in science, and that's definitely you can definitely see that in the show. Were there other objectives that you had within the show of what you wanted to portray, or other things that you wanted to make sure that came out to the viewer?
Well, the first thing is to let the viewer understand, wow, that this is really interesting. Wow, like for our episode on bones and fossils, we had a beautiful session at the Museum of Science, the National Museum here in Kenya, that we hope made young people think, oh, I've never visited the museum. I want to learn more about fossils. The idea is, what can you do with your science learning, and what kind of career can you get out of it as well? So it kind of looks at understanding of one area and the possibility of roles connected to that science project. So like with the fossils one, you could learn about bones. You could be a paleontologist or a doctor. So it allows kids to think, all right, I am learning about the nature of the skeleton, but how useful is this for me? And then you go, oh, I could do this as a doctor. Oh, by the way, I didn't realize the bones were actually alive, this kind of thing. But most importantly is they can see themselves in the show, because a lot of shows that are presented to children tend to have foreigners there, and it's probably not deeply connected to them. So they will enjoy it, but they'll be watching it from, taking a step back, as opposed to being able to project themselves in that person's shoes.
Yeah. And if I can add to the goals of the show, and of course everything that Joy and Irene touched on. So we're fostering a culture of curiosity and discovery that is not yet fully there. Promoting positive gender norms for sure, because there is this myth of science being a boys' domain, science being the difficult subject, and boys do better than girls. That's the misconception. And we also wanted to model new holistic ways of approaching learning. So the show is a variety show. The main part of the show are learning segments where teachers in the studio or in the field present topics, and then we also have fun quizzes and experiments, but also tips for healthy living. We have a fitness segment where a very enthusiastic dancer and fitness expert from Tanzania is demonstrating very simple activities one can do at home. Again, this show was conceptualized in lockdown. There was lockdown in Uganda and Tanzania, well, not that much in Tanzania, in Kenya. People couldn't even leave their compounds if they had a compound, or their small apartments where they were living. So, just get up from the couch and do some jumping jacks and then turn around. Just to, again, dispel the myth that exercise is not something that you need a gym membership for, that you need equipment for. If you cannot go outside and play football with your friends, at least stay active and have some fun, maybe with your siblings, with your parents, or by yourself, by doing these fun exercise and dance moves. We also have a segment that we call Brain Break.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, so we believe that socio-emotional learning is very important, and that is part of learning as a whole. And I don't think there's enough space given to that in sub-Saharan Africa. So we didn't want to use the word meditation or even mindfulness because sometimes it has negative connotations to people here. So we just basically introduced it as, here are some exercises that you can do when you feel sad or anxious, and that there are times when you can feel sad and anxious and worried, and that's really okay, and everybody feels that way. And in order to feel better again, here's a simple thing you can do. And many of these are breathing exercises, that many of them are connected to the topic of the episodes. So for example, in the Bones episode that Joy worked with us on, we encourage viewers to close their eyes and then to clench their fists and to release them and to feel their bones and their muscles. And as they're doing it, to keep breathing and to relax this way. And it's a 1 to 2 minute segment, both this one and the fitness one, that we make part of every episode.
I also noticed watching the show, and I definitely noticed the brain breaks that stood out to me, and I was like, "Oh, that is
because you needed them,
there.
Brian."
I may have needed them myself. I think during the pandemic, many of us have needed to have some socio and emotional kinds of, I guess, resets or pauses in our lives. But I also noticed, and coming from my perspective as a Westerner in the United States, that the show is, as it should be, very African centric. The content that you have is very much from all the countries around Africa. You have geography, you have teachers, you have even the fossils from the Bones episode were African discovered fossils there, and I think that's a fantastic opportunity for you there. Geographically, was it hard to get people from across the continent to participate?
So maybe I can take that. So I'm based in Dar es Salaam. Joy is in Kenya. Irene is in Uganda, but we also have a team in a production team in Nigeria. So the show was produced. Oh, and South Africa, partially. Our animation team is, some of our animation professionals are in South Africa. From the get-go, we wanted this to be a Pan-African show, but Africa is not a country. And that was a big challenge, how do we make a Pan-African show? We chose English to be the language of the show. We could have done it in French, but it was just easier because we come from, as an organization, we come from the US, and we have a strong base in Uganda where English is the official language. So the show was produced in those 4 countries, I would say. But then we wanted more. We wanted to reach more places in Africa. It's such a diverse and wonderful continent. So we have a segment also that's called Africa Teacher Challenge, where we reached out to teachers in more than a dozen countries in Africa, and we asked them to record lessons of their choice in the subject they were passionate about, and send them to us. So we can say we crowdsourced that segment, and this way expanding our production footprint. So yeah, in the Bones episode, we have a teacher zooming in from South Africa. Episode about bees, there's a teacher zooming in from Nigeria, and then we have teachers from Botswana and Ghana, and a few other places on the continent. And this way we gave voice to the teachers on the continent, and show that we're trying to be truly Pan-African.
One of the reasons I asked is that Dale and I we're about a mile away from each other, but we're in the middle. We're in the Midwest, the upper Midwest in the United States, and sometimes it's hard for us to connect with people in different geographical areas for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's a time zone issue, although we're 9 hours apart from you, so we can make that work. But and it's also hard not to stay too focused on what around us. In Wisconsin, we have the University of Wisconsin, which is a a fantastic world-class research facility, and we have to remember there are other scientists out there besides in our in our backyards here, of course, as well.
I love that you picked up on the Afrocentricity of the show, and I think that's one thing that binds us all together. If they talk about the sound, I particularly enjoyed the sound episode. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, but
I just watched the fossil episode, but I haven't got to the sound one yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the African sound obviously is unique in its own way, and it's an opportunity to talk about Africa. I mean, not many people know about Africa and the culture and the food. So even in the food episode, I know there's different. There was one delicacy that I also wasn't familiar with. I think from Tanzania, some bugs. But I think it makes for very interesting content, and also just for, I think, as an objective to put. I think it probably is one way to expose Africa in a way that is positive and not necessarily negative, because it's often portrayed in a negative light. So just to expose Africa in a positive way, but also teach people about a different way of living or a different way of being, but at the same time show that we are in a way alike, because science is cuts across borders. Mm-hmm. We are studying about light, we're studying about heat, we're studying about different forms of energy, which is relatable to everybody. So I think that's one good thing that about science, and I think I've lost my other.
No, I absolutely agree with you, and I love the Afrocentric piece there. I think of an opportunity for students in the United States to see what you have to offer in the continent that a lot of our students would not be exposed to if they didn't have the opportunity. Even myself learning about specific, what is it, the giraffaton, or a fossil I've never heard of that was discovered in Africa, and that discovery of what else is out there was fascinating to me. Joy and Irene, one of the questions I wanted to ask you both was, what have you learned from the show that you may have taken back into your own teaching after learning it or practicing it, or how has that changed your outlook on your own teaching of science?
I think it's just the opportunity that we have as teachers to empower children to learn on the go, to make it practical, because many of the experiments, if you notice, they were using materials that are readily available. I think we're quite deliberate about that. How can children at home do the very same experiment that we're doing? So then you start to realize that many of the experiments can be done, at home using day-to-day materials, and therefore we have no excuse in our classroom not to conduct experiments if we can make them. If it's possible, why not? And so for me, I think the main takeaway was, science is fun, and we need to help the children to enjoy and appreciate all these concepts in a real way, so that it's not theoretical anymore. Let's do more practical stuff in the classroom. So that was my main takeaway. We just, and it's possible, yeah, to keep them inquiring and keep them discovering and keep them learning just by getting them to relate with the materials around them. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with Irene. What I enjoyed the most was lots of things I learnt, and I realized that our learning segments were quite short, and that was on purpose so that you keep the children's attention span going. And when we started off doing the bones and fossils, it was supposed to be vertebrates versus invertebrates. And being able to just change it as we picked up more and more information was one of these wonderful learning things for me. But I ended up turning into this like dinosaur fossils nerd by the end of it.
I love it.
I just didn't know how much was available in Kenya, and like the giraffe titan that you mentioned is a huge fossil that was discovered before Tanzania's independence, and the entire fossil lives in a museum in Berlin, you know.
Oh.
And then there was the discovery of the South African fossil by a farmer.
Yeah, that was a wonderful story.
Wasn't it? Yeah. And for me, just learning about this discovery of this mammoth mammal called Simba Kubwa kutoka Africa, and that was its Latin name, which is actually Kiswahili for big lion from Africa. And that it had actually been, the jawbone had been found in the 80s and then put away in a drawer in the museum. Because we don't have enough local paleontologists, and it took a postdoc research student and I think he came from like Yale, who came to do some work in Kenya, who found this thing and then discovered it was actually, an amazing, unique specimen that had been sat in a drawer in the museum for over 40 years, undiscovered, unidentified. Wow. So these were the things I was like, wow, did you know you could find out this? It's such a different way of picking up information. So learning that useful things like trace fossils, like picking up the poop of a dinosaur, told you what they ate and how they moved, was really, really interesting. And these are the things that you can't share with young people if you're working on a really, really tight curriculum or program of study. So those are the nice things. I was saying to Gosia when we were starting up the project in Kenya, I want to end up with lots of nerds who are going home and finishing off and telling their parents, well, do you know about this and this and this? And getting the kids out of the house. And then the other thing was the singing. Irene is an amazing singer, and I was watching her do the singing on. She converted head, shoulders, knees, and toes into I think it was parts of a flower. I can't remember. And with the repetition, I was like, yes, it was, yeah. And with the repetition, I was like, yeah. Now what we've got to do is make repetitive songs like that will drive the parents mad.
Yes.
Those little earworms in there that you can't get rid of.
Exactly. Because then you know that the children are walking away with something else in their head, and they will keep thinking about it. And there's another new way of learning. So yeah, the segments, adding song and giving the kids additional relevant experiments to do that don't have anything with getting marks or whatever was really important. I remember when we were trying to make the fossil prints as a project for the students, and Gosia's like, no, you got to change some of the ingredients around so that any child who's watching it can make a fossil. So say use coffee grains and flour. She was like, no, just use dirt. And I'm like, oh yeah. Every experiment that has to be something that they can do at home, regardless of what their income bracket is like. And that's really stretched my imagination as well. So it's been a lot of fun doing these things.
Yeah, I like what you said about Joy, about the, an alternative way of learning. So instead of the, intense preparation to cram and get all this content into your head, just make it fun, make it engaging, and make it memorable. Then the children don't have to, to cram it. So yeah. As for that song, I didn't come up with it. I'll own up now. Yeah, there was a team, it was a team effort. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful learning about Engine, and I look forward to seeing more episodes. I know that we can watch it on YouTube, but there's also there's a release that's supposed to be happening on American television too, correct?
Yes. So Engine is showing on the Africa channel, which is a cable channel available in many metropolitan areas in the US. I think you need to contact your local cable operator to see if it's on the list, but it's in most major cities. Mm-hmm. So I hope most listeners can tune in. And it airs on Saturdays at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. 9 a.m. Eastern Time.
Excellent. Whether you watch it on TV or on YouTube, I look forward to future episodes.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That said, do I have time to say one more thing about future episodes?
You bet, for sure.
So we are now preparing season 2, and season 2 will be focused on habitats and climate change, sustainability, and conservation.
We look forward to seeing them.
That's awesome. We look forward to it. Well, congratulations on the progress so far, and I'm really excited to see what comes next.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out, and please let us know when the podcast is ready, and we'll listen and share and be proud. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Lab Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about some of the things discussed in this episode or previous episodes, you can find show notes at our website, laboutloud.com. If you have a guest idea or a future topic that you'd like to see on Lab Out Loud, go to our contact page and send us a message. Also, you can subscribe to Lab Out Loud on your favorite podcasting app, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to find podcasts. While you're there, leave us a review and rating. Your input helps others find our show. Thanks again for listening.